Right, so second time through this game for me, and I'm going to try and explain the rules as I go so that people can both learn the game and point out where I've gone wrong. This is Airborne Commander by Stratamax Games, to be published sometime in 2015 following a Kickstarter campaign. This is an advanced preview copy I've received from the publisher. It's a solo game and a deck builder as well. And let's just look at the setup. To begin with, the player's deck consists of 4 private paratroopers, 4 officers and NCOs, and 3 disorganised cards. And one of the ways the game can end is if I empty the deck of disorganised cards. They're all in my personal player deck. The game is over and I've lost. So let's take my deck and give everything a jolly good shuffle so that we're ready to start. And looking around the rest of the board, we've got the drop zone here, and each turn there are 4 cards that can be recruited. We have the mission deck here, and each turn we have 4 cards in the battleground. And just looking at that, we've got a self-propelled gun, some infantry, a German mortar, and some static defences, a blockhouse. Each card's got an attack value and a defence value, and it tells me whether it's armoured or whether it's infantry. And setting up for the first turn, I start with 5 cards in hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's have a look at what we've got. We've got a couple of privates, 3 privates, a pathfinder and a corporal to take on the 3 German units that can attack me and the blockhouse. It also tells me that with 3 disorganised cards still in my deck, next turn's going to be horrible. Now, you don't have to use every card each turn. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put that one aside for next turn. So looking at it, 2 recruitment points isn't going to get me anything that's there. What's the best way to deal with these? Well, I'd quite like to keep my corporal alive, so we'll send him in the battleground to engage the German infantry. I'm going to engage the self-propelled gun with a paratrooper, the grenade, so the mortar with that paratrooper. Now, do I engage the blockhouse, or do I send 2 men against the mortar to kill it? Well, that blockhouse I think is going to be a bit of a nuisance, so I'm going to engage it. Now, in the combat step, the infantry do 1 damage to my corporal, doesn't exceed his defence. His defence is 1. And he will do 1 damage to the Germans, which doesn't exceed their defence. But they've been engaged, so they go off to the discard pile. He goes off to my discard pile. Now here, this private has only got anti-personnel weapons. He doesn't have any anti-tank weapons, so he can't damage the armoured unit. The armoured unit will do 2 damage to him, which isn't enough to kill him. So off to the discard pile. That's off to the discard pile having been engaged. Here, the mortar does 3 damage to my paratrooper, which is enough to exceed the defence, so he will die. And he does 1 damage to the mortar, which doesn't exceed their defence. So he's gone. Put him in the discard pile. Put him in the game discard pile. He's out of the game. That was engaged. Off to the discards. And the blockhouse, similarly, it's an armoured card. So my anti-infantry guns aren't going to scratch it. They will do 3 damage to the paratrooper exceeding his defence. So he's similarly out of the game. That was engaged. So it's removed from play. Now, I haven't spent any recruitment points this turn. I have to discard 2 cards. They're all quite nice. But it's going to be the Thunderbolt, because that's quite an expensive card. I'm not going to be able to get that into play. And at this stage in the game, I'm going to discard the Browning machine gun. So setting up for next turn, we have 4 cards from the deck in the drop zone. I draw 5 new cards. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's always 5 cards, even though I kept one over from last turn. We draw 4 new cards from the mission deck. Now this second card's an objective. We can't have 2 objectives in the battleground at the moment, so that goes over there and will be scouted and will come into play as soon as there's space for it. Some static defences, some infantry, and an armoured car. Let's look at what we've got to deal with that with. We've got 2 disorganised cards and an officer. Now I can play the officer in to the reserves to discard a disorganised and draw a new one from the deck. And it is the disorganised card. It's a surprise. Those 2 are no use to me, so I simply discard them. He's been used. Now I could muster 2 and 2 recruit points, or 2 and 4. And I've got some units that can get stuck into the fight. Well, short-term pain for long-term gains. I'm going to play these into the support area to use their recruit points, and he will go up against the German infantry. And the combat step, he does 1 damage to the infantry do 2 to him. Both survive, both go to their respective discard piles. This unit wasn't engaged. A unit that isn't engaged runs through your lines and causes more disorganisation before going to the discard pile. These static defences weren't engaged, but unlike units, they stick around from turn to turn. I'll put it over there. It doesn't cause any disorganisation. And this objective wasn't engaged, so it's similarly discarded. Discard the troops in my reserves. Oh no, I haven't used them yet. I've got 4 and 2 recruit points to play with. I'll spend the 4 buying another officer, but everything else is too expensive. I've got to discard one of them. So we have 2 new cards for next turn, and I need to draw 5 cards. So shuffle my deck. Familiar mechanism from other deck building games. And draw 5 new cards. We also have some new mission cards. Some terrain, which means my reinforcements will be slower coming out this turn. We can't have another terrain card. Oh, I forgot to put the objective into play that we'd scouted. That terrain will sit there, be scouted for next turn. Right, what can we do with these chaps? Again, I'm going to play the lieutenant to discard the disorganised from my hand and to draw a replacement card. Can't do the same with this one, but it's no use to me, so I'll simply put it in the discard pile. He's been used. And now I've got lots of recruit points and nothing there that needs to be engaged. And in fact, +1 to small arms attack for Axis units, the roadblocks will both be quite deadly. So instead, I'm going to use my points to recruit. I've got 2 and 2 plus 2 and a 1. So I could combine them to recruit a 4 and a 3. Bearing in mind it's -1 off my reinforcement total, so I keep calling it recruit. It's reinforcement. -1, that means I could recruit a 3 and a 3. That sounds like a very good deal. So I'm going to recruit a jeep. That'll come in handy later on. And do we go for some anti-tank or some suppression? Let's go for the anti-tank. So they've been used. The lieutenant's been used. Everything on the discard pile. This wasn't engaged. Discarded. That terrain's discarded. Now, neither roadblock was engaged. They don't cause disorganisation. They do now stack up. And if we have 4 static defences stacked in that pile, the game is over. Set up for next turn. 4 cards in the drop zone. Oh, need to put that into play from the scouted location. And there we are. We've got machine gun, flak gun, the 2 roadblocks, and terrain that says all defending units are armoured. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for this turn. What have we got? Well, the first thing we can do is we can play a lieutenant to discard a disorganised card, and then we draw a new card from the deck. I don't draw that disorganised card straight back out again. This disorganised card's useless, so it can go off to the discard pile. The corporal's got 1 recruit point. That's not going to be any good for those chaps. And my paratroopers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to send them into action. Now, unless I engage these units, I'm going to take another casualty. So let's engage them with my private paratroopers. And the corporal will engage one of the roadblocks. So in combat, the machine gun kills him. Goes off to the discard pile. I couldn't kill him, he was armoured. The flak gun kills him. Similarly, off to the discard pile, he was armoured. I've engaged one of the roadblocks, which will do enough damage to kill my corporal. Off to the discard pile. The other one stays in play. Again, the terrain is out. Got to lose 2 of these cards. We'll discard a mortar. We've already picked up a bazooka, so let's discard the other bazooka. Draw 2 replacements. Put them in the drop zone. The mission deck. Self-propelled gun. German mortar. German infantry, and 5 new cards. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right, what have we got for this turn? Well, I'll play my second lieutenant to ditch the disorganised card and draw a replacement. And that's 2 disorganised cards that are no good for me. Now, I think most of the disorganised cards are there, so I'm going to play the Jeep into the reserve to draw 2 new cards. 1, 2. That's quite handy. So I could recruit a 4 and a 2 and then take on something with the bazooka. Or I could save him for next turn, engage him with the bazooka, and use the sergeant to suppress the mortar. That's what this icon means. You can cancel the incoming fire of 1 German card. I'll save that till next turn. So, in combat, nothing's opposing this, so he'll give me another disorganised card. This unit was suppressed by the sergeant, so he doesn't get to fire. We'll just go to the discard pile, as will the sergeant. In combat, against the self-propelled gun, the bazooka does 3 damage, which is enough to kill that. So that will go off to my victory point pile. But before it goes, it does 2 damage to the bazooka, which isn't enough to kill it. So that goes to my discard pile. Again, we didn't engage the static defences. So save that card for next turn. They're discarded, and I've got to lose 2 of these. We'll lose the mortar and an anti-tank gun. Hope for another one later. So saving that for next turn, we've got 5 more cards to draw. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we add those 5 cards to the Pathfinder we retained last go. So there we are, and some terrain. Hedgerows, everything gets +1 in its defence. German tank killer, and some infantry. What can we do? Well, again, we've got quite a lot of disorganised cards there, so I'm going to play that in a reserve role to draw 2 more from the deck. 1, 2. And yes, I did draw 2 more disorganiseds. They're all useless, so I'll simply discard them. And now I could use those to recruit a 4 and a 2. But then I'll take 2 more disorganised cards. That won't be good. Or I could recruit a 2 and a 2. That won't get me very far. I think this is probably a mistake. But not sure what to do now. I'm going to use them for their recruit points, so I can recruit a 4 and a 2. So in combat, I'll take 2 more disorganised cards, and they all get discarded. And now I can recruit something costing 4, and something costing up to 2, which would be that. They're discarded. I draw 5 new cards, 3. I think I need to do better at shuffling because those disorganised cards are coming around fairly quick. 4, 5. 2 more cards in the drop zone. And fill out the battleground. So we've got some flooded fields. We can only recruit infantry reinforcements this firefight. That's alright this round. We've got chiefly infantry. Another roadblock, some infantry. That roadblock we haven't dealt with yet. Right, let's look at what we've got. We don't need to do a huge amount to keep the Germans occupied. But I'm going to play him in the reserve to ditch the disorganised and draw a replacement. I'll do the same with him. Ditch that to draw a replacement. Got a Pathfinder. Well, I'm going to use him for the recruit points in a moment. That's no use, I'll just discard that. And I will send this in to play with the infantry. I don't have to engage the roadblocks. So the infantry do 1 damage to my bazooka, which isn't enough to kill them. He does 2 damage to the infantry, not enough to kill them. Everything's discarded. End of the turn, I can recruit 2 units costing up to 2 each, which will be those 2. I think I need some more cannon fodder. That gets stacked with the roadblock. That's discarded. So for next turn, draw 2 cards for the drop deck. 3 new cards in the battleground and 5 cards into my hand. Right. Oh dear. 3 disorganised cards, they're no good. We'll discard them. And really got to try and deal with the disorganised cards quite quickly. There's not a lot there that I'm particularly looking at recruiting. That objective, +2 small arms attack for all Axis units. So engaging things is going to be painful. Well, I'm going to send my Thompson armed sergeant to suppress, that's what that icon means, suppress the incoming fire of that, and use my Browning automatic equipped private to take on a roadblock. So in combat, the roadblock has got +2 attack, so it'll do 5 attack and kill the paratrooper, so he's out of the game. It's been engaged, so it's discarded. The Germans don't get to fire because they're suppressed, so they're discarded, as is the sergeant. Didn't deal with the objective, so that's discarded. They stay there. I also haven't recruited anything this turn, so I've got to ditch 2 cards. Let's lose those 2. Draw 2 replacements. Our first captain. Setting up for next turn, 5 cards. See if I can break up that clump of disorganised cards. 4, 5. And the battleground. German mortar. An objective. -2 to reinforcement total this firefight. And stuck it again. Right. Let's see what we've got. Well, we'll play the lieutenant to discard the disorganised and draw a replacement. As ever, it's a replacement disorganised card. They're no use to me, so I will discard them. I could use the Jeep either for extra cards or for 2 recruit points. Well, we know that no point in reinforcing this turn, so I'll play that to draw 2 new cards. 1, 2. Oh, what I should have done is save those disorganised cards, because I could now play that to ditch one and draw a replacement. And that's looking a bit more like it. What should we do? I think we suppress the Grenadiers. We'll send the bazooka to fight with the tank, and we'll send a corporal against a roadblock. I can't take that objective unless all of the roadblocks are also engaged. So in combat, 3 damage to the bazooka wielder. Bazooka wielder does 3 damage to the tank. Not enough to kill the tank, is enough to kill my second bazooka chap. He will suppress, and he will engage one of the roadblocks, so it's discarded, but in return he will die. End of the turn, that's discarded. I've got to lose 2 of these. Really don't want to lose that officer, they're quite useful. So I don't really want to lose the cheap ones either. Needs must. Discard those 2. Oh, drew exactly the ones I just discarded. 5 new cards. And 4 cards in the mission zone. Defending units are considered armoured. So that's armoured. That's armoured anyway. As now is that. And 3 disorganised cards with not a lot to show for them, so we'll just discard them. Now, a Thompson armed paratrooper, my sergeant here, can't suppress anything this turn because they're all hiding out in that Holdy Manor. So, what I could do is just take me lumps and recruit with a 4 and a 2, which will get me both that Pathfinder and another trooper, but it does mean I'm going to get disorganised as he runs through. Discarded, and that stacks up with the other static defence. 2 new cards in the drop deck. We'll scout that objective for next turn. And 5 cards. 1, 2... 3, 4, 5. And all we've got is a lieutenant and lots of disorganisation. Well, I'm going to use him to discard one of those and draw a new card. Same again, lieutenant, discard that, draw a card. They're no use. So, end of the turn in combat, they will give me a disorganised card each, and as I've emptied the disorganised deck, I lose. I have been overrun by the Germans. My unit has lost all combat cohesion. And we were just over halfway through the mission deck. That's all she wrote.